Dubai looks like a city that defeated the desert. Water dances beneath the Burj Khalifa. Families disappear into giant water parks. Hotels advertise private beaches, temperature-controlled pools, spas, fountains, gardens, and bathrooms where no guest is supposed to think twice before turning a tap. From the Palm to downtown, the city sells a simple feeling. Water is always there. But that feeling depends on a machine. As of the end of March 2026, Dubai Electricity and Water Authority reported 555 million imperial gallons per day of installed desalination capacity. Of that total, 490 million gallons per day were still located at the Jebel Ali complex. That does not mean Jebel Ali is one single switch that can turn Dubai off. It is a large complex with multiple units and layers of redundancy. But it does reveal something important. A huge part of the system that makes fresh water for Dubai is concentrated in one industrial zone on the coast. Now imagine a serious technical or environmental disruption keeps a meaningful share of desalination output offline for days. Not forever, just long enough for conservation to become necessary. What would Dubai protect first? And what would it sacrifice first? The answer may not begin with drinking water disappearing from homes. It could begin with the things the world recognizes as Dubai. A fountain, a mall, a water park, an artificial island, a wall of residential towers, a hotel built around unlimited luxury, and finally, the district beneath the tallest building on Earth. Because a city can still have water and yet begin losing the version of itself that people came to see. The basic system is easy to understand. Seawater enters desalination plants, freshwater leaves. Reservoirs, pumping systems, and a vast distribution network help move that water toward homes, hotels, restaurants, offices, and public facilities. Dubai is also expanding that system. The first 60 million gallons per day from the Hassian Seawater Reverse Osmosis Project entered service in 2026, lifting total capacity to 555 million gallons per day. More capacity is planned. That is important because demand is not standing still. In 2025, Dubai recorded a daily peak desalinated water demand of 487 million imperial gallons. The point is not that Dubai is about to hit a wall. Capacity is not the same thing as actual daily production, and a modern water network is far more complicated than one number divided by another. The point is simpler. Dubai moves extraordinary volumes of manufactured fresh water every day. So if a major disruption ever forced conservation, not every use of that water would feel equally essential. And the easiest place to understand that is number 7. At night, the Dubai fountain makes water look effortless. Jets rise from Burj Lake while thousands of people hold up phones, and the Burj Khalifa glows behind them. It is one of those scenes that tells a tourist exactly where they are without a single word. But in a true conservation emergency, there is an obvious question. If water has to be prioritized, do you protect water people need or water people watch? There is no public Dewa list saying the Dubai fountain would be shut first. This is a hypothetical stress test, not a prediction of an official rationing order. Yet the logic is easy for anyone to follow. A fountain is visible. A fountain is symbolic. And a fountain can stop without stopping a hospital, an apartment, or a kitchen. That makes it the perfect first warning in our scenario. Imagine the music continuing while the water stays flat. Crowds still arrive. Phones come out. But the show is gone. Dubai has not failed. Nobody is suddenly unable to drink. Yet something has changed. The city has made its first visible trade. And that matters because Dubai is a tourism machine as much as it is a residential city. In 2025, it welcomed 19.59 million international overnight visitors. A single silent fountain would not create a tourism crisis. But it would show the rule that drives everything that follows. When water becomes precious, spectacle is easier to sacrifice than necessity. And across the lake sits a place where water is much harder to separate from normal operation. Dubai Mall changes the question. At the fountain, water is something you see. Inside a giant mall, most of the water that matters is invisible. It is in bathrooms. It is in hand washing. It is in kitchens. It is in cleaning. It is in staff facilities. It supports restaurants serving thousands of meals, workers maintaining public spaces, and visitors moving through one of the most famous retail destinations in the world. The mall even contains a massive aquarium, but the dramatic water behind the glass is not the important water in this scenario. That is the trick. The water that keeps a crowded building usable is often the water nobody photographs. Think about the last mall you visited. How many times did you depend on water without noticing? A serious shortage does not need to make a building dark to make it difficult to operate. Management could reduce non-essential uses. Cleaning schedules could change. Some services could be restricted. Food and beverage operations would become more sensitive to supply. Bathrooms would become a bigger operational concern. None of this means Dubai Mall would automatically close. It means the crisis has moved from a show into basic building function. And that is a much more uncomfortable idea. Because once people stop asking whether a fountain can perform and start asking whether a crowded building can operate normally, the stakes have changed. But Dubai has an even stranger category of attraction, a place where water is not hidden infrastructure. Water is the product itself. At Aquaventure, removing water does not simply reduce the experience. It changes what the place is. Atlantis markets Aquaventure as the world's largest water park, filled with slides, rivers, pools, waterfalls, beaches, and marine experiences. You do not need a technical diagram to understand the vulnerability in a conservation scenario. Dubai Mall uses water while selling shopping, dining, and entertainment. Aquaventure sells an experience built around water. That distinction matters. A restaurant can change a menu. A fountain can stop performing. A hotel can close a pool. But a water park cannot remove the thing that gives the attraction its identity and pretend nothing has changed. Again, this does not mean the water park is scheduled to lose supply. It means that if authorities and operators ever had to protect essential consumption, water-intensive leisure would face a very different calculation from drinking, sanitation, and emergency services. And that calculation reaches beyond one day at a theme park. Tourists choose Dubai partly because it promises comfort in a climate where comfort requires enormous systems working behind the scenes. Pools, beaches, chilled interiors, immaculate hotels, and attractions all form one package. Start removing pieces of that package, and the tourism problem is not that visitors literally cannot survive. The problem is that the product they paid for begins to change. Then pull the view back from Atlantis. The water park becomes smaller, the hotel becomes smaller, and the outline of Palm Jumeirah fills the frame. Suddenly the problem is no longer one attraction, it is an entire district. Palm Jumeirah is one of the clearest symbols of Dubai's ability to manufacture an environment. An island was built into the Gulf, followed by resorts, apartments, villas, restaurants, pools, and famous hospitality brands. But the important transition here is not from one attraction to another. It is from tourism into daily life. At Atlantis, conservation can be imagined as a change in leisure. Across the Palm, water also supports residents, staff, kitchens, bathrooms, cleaning, and ordinary routines hidden behind spectacular architecture. The postcard is also a neighborhood. A desalination disruption serious enough to force broad conservation would not erase the island. Its roads would remain. Its towers would remain. Its beaches would remain. But the priorities inside those buildings could start changing. Decorative water becomes less important. Some leisure services become easier to restrict. Pools and landscaping become harder to defend than hygiene. The point is not that every property would react the same way. The point is that the crisis has expanded into a district where essential and non-essential uses sit side by side. And once water pressure moves from the resort brochure into residential life, the next question becomes personal. What happens when you are no longer watching the shortage? What happens when you wake up inside it? Imagine waking up high above Dubai Marina. Outside the window, the towers still look perfect. The yachts are still below. The promenade still curves around the water. Nothing about the skyline tells you there is a problem. Then you turn on the shower. Maybe the water still runs normally. Maybe pressure has been reduced. Maybe your building has introduced restrictions on non-essential uses. The exact response would depend on the situation, the network, and building management. But now the issue feels different because it is inside your routine. The swimming pool downstairs can close, and you can live with it. Landscaping can be reduced, and you can live with it. A decorative feature can stop, and you can live with it. But a shower, a toilet, a restaurant kitchen, laundry, cleaning, and basic hygiene sit in another category. Dubai Marina and JBR make that distinction visible because this is a dense waterfront district of towers, hotels, restaurants, apartments, shops, and public spaces. All of those layers overlap. Building tanks and pumping systems can help manage supply and buy time. But a storage tank does not manufacture tomorrow's water. Until now, the crisis could feel like someone else's inconvenience. Now imagine it is your apartment. Which matters first to you? The empty pool outside or the tap inside? This is where a hypothetical water crisis stops looking like a tourism story and starts looking like an urban story. And yet Dubai has another sector where the promise is not merely that water will be available. The promise is that the guest will never have to think about limits at all. The Burj Al Arab is not just a place to sleep. Jumeirah presents it as an icon of Arabian luxury, with private beach experiences, pools, dining, spa services, and a level of hospitality designed to make ordinary constraints disappear. That is why it belongs near the top of this list. A luxury hotel needs water for basic life, but also to protect the experience it sells. Rooms must be cleaned. Restaurants must operate. Laundry must move. Bathrooms must work. Pools, spas, beach facilities, and landscaping help create the feeling guests paid for. If a severe conservation period ever forced hotels to separate essential from non-essential use, the building itself could remain fully recognizable while the luxury proposition started shrinking around it. That is the tourism risk. Dubai welcomed 19.59 million international overnight visitors in 2025, up 5% from the year before. Millions arrive expecting consistency. A restriction at one hotel would not crash tourism. But widespread reductions in the amenities that define Dubai's premium image could change traveler perception, especially if a disruption lasted long enough to become international news. That is why the Burj Al Arab represents something bigger than pools or spas. It represents confidence. The confidence that the desert can always be made comfortable. By this point, our scenario sounds increasingly severe. But there is a major problem with the nightmare. Dubai has prepared for water emergencies, and that changes the story again. This is where we have to stop the countdown for a moment, because Dubai is not sitting beside the sea with no backup plan. DEWA has expanded desalination capacity, built storage, developed strategic connections, and pursued aquifer storage and recovery, which stores desalinated water underground for later use. DEWA has described the full-scale concept as capable of providing more than 50 million imperial gallons per day for up to 90 days during emergencies. That is a serious resilience measure. Hasian adds another layer. The first 60 million gallons per day entered service in 2026, and further capacity is planned. So one failure does not automatically mean Dubai wakes up with dry taps. A modern utility manages production, storage, distribution, interconnections, and emergency response as a system. The UAE water security strategy itself is built around maintaining access to water in normal conditions and emergencies. For a moment, the nightmare seems to disappear. Dubai is prepared. But notice what those emergency systems are designed to protect. Water security, continuity, essential access. Those are not exactly the same thing as preserving every normal use of water across one of the world's most tourism-intensive cities. An emergency reserve can help keep critical water available. It does not magically make scarcity irrelevant. If a disruption were severe enough, the question would still become one of priorities. Which uses can be reduced? Which can wait? Which experiences can be temporarily sacrificed? Which functions cannot? That is why surviving a water emergency and keeping normal Dubai completely unchanged are two different goals. And there is another reason this matters. Tourism is unusually sensitive to perception. A city does not need to lose every service before travelers begin changing plans. If reports of restrictions spread, visitors may start asking whether pools are open, whether hotels are operating normally, whether attractions are affected, and whether a premium trip will still feel premium. That is how an infrastructure problem can become a tourism problem before it becomes a humanitarian one. And once you understand that difference, the final landmark stops being about a single building. It becomes about the city beneath it. We end where we began, at the Burj Khalifa, not because there is evidence that the world's tallest building would be first to lose water. There is not. And not because a desalination problem would make the tower suddenly fail. That is not the argument. Burj Khalifa is number one because downtown compresses almost every layer of this story into one view. Look down from the tower. Homes, hotels, restaurants, offices, Dubai Mall, the fountain, tourists, workers, and residents all share the same district. Luxury and necessity sit side by side. The fountain was the easiest sacrifice. Then the issue moved into building operations, water-based leisure, neighborhoods, apartments, and luxury hospitality. Downtown is where those questions collide. That is why the most important image is not a Burj Khalifa with the lights turned off. It is a Burj Khalifa standing exactly as it always has while the city below quietly changes its priorities. The fountain could stop. Pools or landscaping could be reduced. Hotels could protect essential services while trimming water-intensive extras. Buildings could manage consumption more carefully. None of that is collapse. It is adaptation. But each step would reveal something the skyline normally hides. Dubai's apparent abundance is supported by continuous infrastructure. The desert did not stop being dry because skyscrapers arrived. The city built systems powerful enough to make dryness easy to forget. That achievement is real. So is the dependence it creates. And this is where running dry changes meaning. It does not have to mean people suddenly have nothing to drink. It can mean separating what is essential from what is iconic. Taps keep running while fountains stay still. Homes are protected while luxury amenities are reduced. That matters because tourism depends on confidence and consistency. Those 19.59 million overnight visitors represent millions of expectations. A ready room, an operating restaurant, a working bathroom, a city that feels effortless. A prolonged water emergency would not need to destroy a landmark to damage that promise. It would only need to make enough visitors notice the machinery behind it. That may be the most interesting vulnerability. The water system is almost invisible. You notice fountains, pools, beaches, and skylines. You do not notice desalination units, reservoirs, pumps, and emergency planning until something forces you to. So which landmark would really run dry first? There may never be an official answer. Real emergencies depend on conditions, safety, essential demand, and technical priorities. But the thought experiment exposes a hidden hierarchy. First, protect life. Then protect sanitation. Then protect essential operations. And somewhere below those priorities sit the spectacles and luxuries that make Dubai famous. The most vulnerable thing may not be Burj Khalifa. It may not be Atlantis. It may not even be the fountain. It may be the idea that Dubai can make natural limits disappear forever. That is the paradox. Dubai is not casually ignoring water risk. Its expanding capacity and emergency planning show the opposite. That makes the story more interesting, not less. A city does not build resilience because water is irrelevant. It builds resilience because water is fundamental. So the real question is not whether Dubai will suddenly run out tomorrow. There is no evidence that it will. The real question is what a city built around extraordinary comfort would look like during a prolonged period when every gallon had to be judged by importance. The first sign might be almost harmless. A fountain becomes still. Then an attraction changes. Then a hotel trims the experience. Eventually, the story is no longer about one landmark. It is about the system connecting them. Dubai may be able to keep people supplied while parts of the lifestyle around them are temporarily reduced. That is the difference between keeping a city alive and keeping its image untouched. And in a place famous for making the impossible look effortless, that distinction matters. That is also why this scenario matters beyond Dubai. Any city that hides scarcity behind infrastructure depends on public systems working so reliably that most people forget they exist. Dubai simply makes that contrast unusually visible. This video is a hypothetical infrastructure stress test based on publicly available information about Dubai's water system, tourism sector, and major landmarks. It does not claim that Dubai is currently facing an imminent citywide water shortage. It does not claim that DEWA has published a priority list for cutting water to the locations discussed. Actual emergency decisions would depend on real-time technical conditions, public safety, essential services, available storage, network operations, and official response plans. The purpose is to explain how dependence, redundancy, and conservation priorities could interact in an extreme scenario. If you had to protect only one layer of Dubai first, what would you choose? Homes, hotels, hospitals, tourism, or the public spaces that define the city's identity? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories about the hidden systems keeping megacities alive, subscribe. Because sometimes the most important part of a skyline is the infrastructure you never see.